5 paranormal mysteries that science cannot explain. In an age of advanced forensics, satellite surveillance, and digital documentation, it seems impossible that genuine mysteries could still exist. Every death should have a cause, every disappearance should leave a trail, and every strange occurrence should yield to scientific investigation. Yet some cases resist all attempts at rational explanation, creating gaps in our understanding that grow more disturbing with each failed investigation. The following accounts document 5 paranormal mysteries that have confounded investigators for decades or even centuries. Despite extensive research, expert analysis, and modern technology, these cases remain as baffling today as when they first occurred. Each involves circumstances so bizarre and evidence so contradictory that conventional explanations simply cannot account for what happened. What makes these mysteries truly unsettling is not just their unsolved nature, but the suggestion that some events may exist beyond the boundaries of current human knowledge. Phenomena that challenge our basic assumptions about reality, death, and the natural world. When the story ends, tell me in the comments which one unsettled you the most. Your feedback helps me shape darker, better horror stories every single night. Number 1. The Enfield Poltergeist. Between August 1977 and September 1979, a modest council house at 284 Green Street in Enfield, North London, became the epicenter of one of the most extensively documented and terrifying poltergeist cases in modern history. The phenomena that plagued the Hodgson family were witnessed by over 30 investigators, police officers, journalists, and neighbors. Yet no rational explanation has ever been found for the impossible events that transformed an ordinary home into a supernatural battleground. The haunting began when single mother Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children started experiencing furniture moving on its own throughout their house. What started as occasional chair movements quickly escalated into a full-scale paranormal assault that would terrorize the family for 2 years and baffle investigators from the Church of England, the Society for Psychical Research, and Scotland Yard. The phenomena defied all attempts at rational explanation and seemed to focus particularly on 11-year-old Janet Hodgson, who became the primary target of increasingly violent supernatural attacks. Witnesses watched Janet being thrown from her bed by invisible forces, hurled across rooms, and lifted into the air for extended periods while remaining rigid and unconscious. Medical examinations during these episodes found no evidence of deception or voluntary muscle control. Police Constable Caroline Heaps was among the first official witnesses to document impossible events at the Hodgson home. During her initial investigation, she watched a heavy chest of drawers slide 4 feet across the room with no human contact, defying gravity as it moved uphill across an uneven floor. Her official report stated that she observed phenomena that challenged everything I understood about the physical world. The supernatural activity escalated to include massive furniture movements that required multiple strong adults to accomplish normally. Witnesses documented refrigerators moving across kitchen floors, sofas turning upside down in seconds, and beds rotating 180 degrees with occupants still in them. The forces involved were calculated to exceed human strength capabilities, yet no machinery or external assistance could be identified. Maurice Gross, a researcher from the Society for Psychical Research, spent over 2 years documenting the phenomena and recorded over 1,500 separate incidents of paranormal activity. His meticulous notes describe objects appearing and disappearing, spontaneous fires starting and extinguishing with no ignition source, and temperatures dropping 15-20 degrees in specific rooms, while adjacent areas remained normal. The most disturbing aspect of the haunting was the emergence of violent, intelligent communication from unseen entities. Family members and investigators heard voices speaking through Janet that claimed to be spirits of people who had died in the house. The voices demonstrated knowledge of events and people that Janet couldn't possibly have known about, speaking in accents and using vocabulary completely different from her normal speech patterns. One entity that identified itself as Bill Wilkins, an elderly man who had died in the house years earlier, provided specific details about his death and life that were later verified through historical records. The voice spoke for hours at a time, carrying on complex conversations with investigators while Janet appeared to be unconscious or in a trance state that medical professionals couldn't classify or explain. During supernatural communication sessions, Janet's physical condition changed in ways that medical experts found impossible to fake. Her voice shifted to that of an elderly man speaking in a gruff Cockney accent, completely different from her normal speech. Doctors confirmed that the vocal changes required physical alterations to throat and larynx structure that couldn't be produced voluntarily by a child. The phenomena were captured on audio recordings and photographs by multiple independent sources, including BBC television crews, newspaper photographers, and paranormal researchers. The evidence showed objects in motion with no visible causes, people being physically moved by invisible forces, and spontaneous appearance of water and other substances throughout the house. Skeptical investigators attempting to debunk the case found themselves unable to replicate the documented phenomena or identify any conventional explanations for the events they witnessed firsthand. Guy Lyon Playfair, a respected paranormal researcher, spent months trying to find evidence of fraud or deception, but instead documented increasingly dramatic supernatural activity that convinced him the haunting was genuine. The haunting included physical attacks on family members that left visible injuries with no identifiable cause. Janet and her siblings showed scratches, bruises, and bite marks that appeared spontaneously in front of witnesses. Medical examinations found that the injuries had characteristics inconsistent with self-inflicted wounds or normal accidents. Scientific equipment brought into the house malfunctioned in specific patterns that suggested intelligent interference rather than random technical problems. Recording devices stopped functioning during peak supernatural activity. Cameras malfunctioned when pointed at areas where phenomena were occurring, and temperature monitoring equipment registered impossible readings that defied environmental physics. The case attracted international attention from scientists, clergy, and paranormal researchers, but no one could provide satisfactory explanations for the documented events. The Church of England sent investigators who confirmed supernatural activity beyond their theological framework, while university physicists found phenomena that violated known laws of physics. After 2 years of intensive activity, the manifestations gradually subsided and eventually stopped, leaving the Hodgson family traumatized but finally able to live normally. However, the extensive documentation of impossible events witnessed by credible observers has never been debunked or explained, making the Enfield poltergeist one of the most compelling paranormal mysteries on record. Number 2. The Phoenix Lights. On the evening of March 13, 1997, thousands of witnesses across Arizona observed massive, silent aircraft displaying lights in formation that moved slowly across the sky for several hours, creating one of the most widely witnessed UFO events in modern history. Despite extensive investigation by military authorities, aviation experts, and civilian researchers, no explanation has ever been provided for craft that displayed flight characteristics impossible for known aircraft technology. The first sightings began around 7:30 p.m. when residents of Paulden, Arizona, reported seeing a massive V-shaped object silently passing overhead. The craft was described as larger than a football field, moving at approximately 30 mph and displaying 5 bright lights arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. Witnesses estimated the object's altitude at around 1,000 feet, low enough to block out sections of the night sky as it passed. As the object continued southeast, it was observed by witnesses in Prescott Valley, and other communities along a flight path that eventually led to Phoenix. At each location, independent observers described identical characteristics: a massive triangular craft moving silently through the sky with impossible aerodynamic properties for any known aircraft. The sightings reached mass scale when the object arrived over Phoenix around 8:30 p.m., where thousands of residents observed 5 lights in perfect formation moving slowly across the metropolitan area. Unlike conventional aircraft, the lights maintained exact spacing and coordination while moving at speeds too slow for airplane flight and without producing any sound audible to ground observers. Dr. Lynn Kaitei, a physician and former Air Force officer, documented the event extensively and became one of the most credible witnesses to the phenomenon. From her home in Paradise Valley, she observed and photographed the lights as they passed directly overhead, noting that the craft appeared solid and blocked out sections of stars as it moved across the sky. Commercial pilot Ray Bowyer, who was flying near Phoenix during the event, reported observing the formation from his aircraft and noted that the lights maintained perfect positioning relative to each other while moving in patterns that violated aviation physics. His professional assessment confirmed that no known aircraft could produce the observed flight characteristics, especially the ability to move at extremely slow speeds without stalling. The Arizona National Guard initially denied any military aircraft operations in the area during the sighting timeframe, but later claimed that A-10 Warthog aircraft had been conducting training exercises and dropping flares. However, this explanation failed to account for the observed characteristics of the Phoenix lights, including their coordinated movement, sustained visibility, and impossible flight patterns. Investigation revealed that the military explanation was inconsistent with witness observations and physical evidence. Flares typically burn for 3 to 5 minutes and drift with wind patterns, but the Phoenix lights remained visible for over 2 hours and moved in coordinated formation against wind direction. Additionally, flares produce visible smoke and debris that wasn't observed by any witnesses. The event was captured on video by multiple independent sources, creating a substantial archive of visual evidence that has been analyzed by aviation experts and video specialists. The footage consistently shows lights moving in impossible formation patterns while maintaining perfect geometric spacing that would require unprecedented coordination for conventional aircraft. Luke Air Force Base, located west of Phoenix, should have detected any aircraft in the area using their sophisticated radar systems. But military officials claimed no unusual radar contacts were recorded during the sighting period. This absence of radar detection for objects observed by thousands of people created additional questions about the phenomenon's physical properties. Governor Fife Symington, who initially dismissed the sightings publicly, later admitted that he had personally witnessed the Phoenix lights and found them unexplainable. His reversal came 10 years after the event, when he acknowledged that the objects displayed characteristics beyond known aviation technology and deserved serious scientific investigation. The Phoenix lights demonstrated intelligent movement patterns that suggested controlled flight rather than natural phenomena or conventional aircraft. Witnesses reported that the formation would separate, reconverge, and adjust its configuration in response to terrain features, indicating purposeful navigation rather than random movement. Analysis of witness testimonies revealed consistent descriptions despite independent observation from different locations and perspectives. The mathematical probability of thousands of witnesses independently fabricating identical false observations approaches zero, lending credibility to the reality of the unexplained phenomenon. Subsequent investigations have identified additional military activities in the area during March 1997, including classified aircraft testing at nearby facilities, but none of these programs could account for the specific characteristics observed during the Phoenix Lights event. The combination of massive size, silent operation, and impossible flight dynamics remains beyond the capabilities of known military technology. The Phoenix Lights represent one of the most documented mass UFO sightings in history, with evidence from credible witnesses including pilots, law enforcement officers, and government officials. Despite extensive investigation and multiple alternative theories, no conventional explanation has successfully accounted for all observed characteristics of the phenomenon, leaving it as one of the most compelling unsolved mysteries in modern aviation history. Number 3. The Devil's Footprints. On the morning of February 9, 1855, residents across South Devon, England, awoke to discover mysterious tracks in the snow that stretched for over 100 miles across the countryside, appearing to have been made by a single creature that traveled in a perfect straight line through houses, over rooftops, across rivers, and through solid walls. The tracks, which resembled cloven hoof prints, sparked mass hysteria and remain unexplained despite extensive investigation by naturalists, clergy, and government officials. The phenomenon began during a heavy snowfall on the night of February 8th, when temperatures dropped well below freezing and created perfect conditions for preserving tracks. By morning, residents across more than 30 parishes reported finding identical hoofprints in their yards, gardens, and even on the roofs of their houses. The tracks appeared to follow impossible routes that defied the laws of physics and animal behavior. What made the prints impossible to explain was their supernatural consistency and impossible path. Each print measured exactly 4 inches long and 2.75 inches wide, spaced precisely 8 or 9 inches apart in a single file line. The depth and clarity remained identical whether the tracks crossed soft garden soil, frozen ground, or fresh snow, suggesting uniform pressure that couldn't be produced by any known animal gait. The route taken by whatever created the tracks defied rational explanation. Witnesses found prints on top of 14-foot-high walls, across rooftops with steep pitches, and continuing in straight lines through brick walls as if the creature had passed through solid matter. The tracks crossed the River Exe estuary, appearing on both sides without any indication of swimming or wading through the 2-mile-wide body of water. Most disturbing was the tracks' apparent intelligence and purposeful navigation. Rather than following natural animal paths or terrain features, the prints moved in straight lines toward population centers, investigating human dwellings with what witnesses described as deliberate curiosity. The creature appeared to examine outbuildings, circle houses, and investigate areas where humans lived and worked. Reverend Musgrave, who documented the phenomenon extensively, reported that the tracks showed evidence of the creature stopping to examine specific objects and locations. At several sites, the prints formed small circles as if the animal had paused to investigate, then continued in the same impossible straight line toward the next human settlement. The track's interaction with buildings and structures suggested abilities that no earthly creature possesses. Witnesses found prints on top of haystacks 15 feet high, with no evidence of climbing or jumping to reach these positions. The creature apparently passed through greenhouses without disturbing plants, walked across snow-covered roofs without causing collapse, and continued its journey without deviation for obstacles. Local naturalist William Pengilly conducted scientific examination of the prints and concluded that they couldn't have been made by any known animal. The uniform spacing, identical depth, and single-file pattern didn't match the gait of any quadruped. The prints showed no variation for terrain, speed, or direction changes that would be expected from natural animal movement. Government officials dispatched to investigate reported that the tracks demonstrated knowledge of local geography that would be impossible for a migrating animal. The creature's route connected villages and towns in patterns that suggested familiarity with human settlement patterns and road networks, yet followed paths that would be impassable for terrestrial animals. The investigation revealed that several domestic animals had died during the night the tracks appeared, found frozen in what witnesses described as positions of extreme terror. Dogs refused to follow the scent trail of the tracks, becoming agitated and fearful when brought near the prints. Horses and cattle showed signs of panic when the tracks passed through their fields. Church officials documented that the prints approached every church and chapel in the affected area, circling religious buildings multiple times before continuing. Some clergy interpreted this as evidence of demonic visitation, while others suggested unknown natural phenomena with apparent attraction to sacred spaces. Contemporary newspapers struggled to explain the phenomenon, publishing theories ranging from escaped kangaroos to atmospheric electricity to secret government experiments. However, none of these explanations could account for the impossible physical path, uniform print characteristics, or 100-mile journey accomplished in a single night. Modern analysis of preserved plaster casts and detailed drawings has failed to identify any known animal that could produce such tracks. Computer modeling of the route shows that the terrain and obstacles would be impassable for any terrestrial creature, requiring flight or supernatural abilities to complete the documented path. Recent investigations have discovered historical records of similar phenomena in other locations during the 19th century, suggesting the Devon incident may not have been unique. Reports from Scotland, Ireland, and northern England describe comparable mysterious tracks appearing in snow, always following impossible routes and showing identical characteristics. The Devil's footprints remain a perfect example of a mystery where physical evidence clearly documents an impossible event, challenging basic assumptions about the natural world and leaving open questions about phenomena that may exist beyond current scientific understanding. Number 4. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery. On December 26, 1900, the lighthouse relief vessel Hesperus arrived at the remote Flannan Isles off the Scottish coast to discover that all 3 lighthouse keepers had vanished without trace, leaving behind a scene so disturbing and inexplicable that investigators concluded forces beyond human understanding were responsible for their disappearance. The missing men were Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. experienced lighthouse keepers with decades of service who were known for their reliability and adherence to strict operational protocols. The lighthouse had been dark for several days, prompting concerns from shipping companies about the safety of vessels navigating the treacherous waters around the uninhabited islands. What relief keeper Joseph Moore found when he landed defied rational explanation. The lighthouse was in perfect working order with no mechanical problems or damage that could explain its failure to operate. The keepers' beds were unmade, suggesting they had left suddenly, but their personal belongings, including warm clothing and wet weather gear, remained in the lighthouse as if they had simply vanished from inside the building. The most disturbing discovery was the condition of the lighthouse logbook and duty records. The final official entry, written in James Ducat's handwriting, was dated December 15th, 11 days before the relief arrival, and recorded routine weather observations and maintenance activities. However, several unofficial notes in different handwriting suggested something extraordinary had been happening during the keeper's final days. Investigators found personal notes that described unusual weather phenomena that didn't match meteorological records from nearby stations. One note, apparently written by Thomas Marshall, described severe winds the likes of which I have never seen, and waves reaching heights impossible for these waters. Official weather data showed calm conditions throughout the period when these extreme phenomena were supposedly occurring. Another note, believed written by Donald MacArthur, referenced strange lights appearing on the horizon and sounds from the sea that don't belong to natural storms. The handwriting became increasingly erratic in later entries, suggesting psychological distress, but official communications with the lighthouse headquarters showed no indication of problems or requests for assistance. The lighthouse showed evidence of hasty departure, but also signs of methodical preparation that couldn't be reconciled. Windows had been securely fastened and doors properly locked, indicating careful attention to shutdown procedures. However, the oil lamps were unlit despite being filled, and the clockwork mechanism that rotated the lighthouse beam had stopped, suggesting sudden abandonment of duties. Outside the lighthouse, investigators found evidence of extraordinary forces that defied natural explanation. The iron railings around the lighthouse platform had been twisted and bent, requiring tremendous force that couldn't be attributed to wind or sea spray. Heavy stone coping on the cliff edge had been displaced, with blocks weighing over 20 tons moved from their foundations. Most puzzling was the complete absence of bodies or personal effects outside the lighthouse. The surrounding cliffs and rocky shores showed no evidence of the keepers falling or being swept into the sea. Search parties found no clothing, tools, or human remains despite extensive exploration of the island and offshore waters. Local residents from nearby islands reported seeing unusual lights around the Flannan Isles during the period when the keepers disappeared. Witnesses described columns of fire rising from the sea and unnatural illumination that didn't match lighthouse operations or known shipping activity. Some observers reported hearing voices calling across the water in languages they didn't recognize. The investigation was complicated by reports of supernatural phenomena that preceded the disappearance. Mainland lighthouse authorities had received strange telegraphs from the Flannan Isle station during the weeks before the men vanished. Messages that used proper codes and procedures but requested supplies and assistance that didn't match normal operational needs. Maritime records showed that several ships passing the Flannan Isles during the disappearance period reported seeing the lighthouse beam operating normally, continuing its rotation schedule despite the absence of keepers. These reports came from different vessels at different times, suggesting the lighthouse continued functioning automatically for days after the keepers had vanished. Weather analysis revealed that conditions around the Flannan Isles during the disappearance period were far more severe than recorded by the lighthouse logbook, with storm patterns that maritime experts described as meteorologically impossible for that location and season. The discrepancy between official weather records and physical evidence suggested the keepers experienced environmental conditions that existed independently of regional weather systems. Modern investigations have failed to resolve the mystery despite advances in maritime archaeology and search technology. Underwater surveys around the islands have found no evidence of the missing men or their equipment. Analysis of lighthouse equipment shows no mechanical failures or damage that could explain the operational problems. The Flannan Isles lighthouse mystery remains unsolved despite over a century of investigation, with evidence suggesting the three experienced keepers encountered something beyond natural maritime dangers that resulted in their complete disappearance from a secured, isolated location where concealment or escape should have been impossible. Number 5. The Elisa Lam case. On February 19, 2013, the body of 21-year-old Canadian student Elisa Lam was discovered in a rooftop water tank at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles under circumstances so bizarre that investigators struggled to determine whether her death was suicide, accident, or something beyond conventional explanation. The case became one of the most analyzed paranormal mysteries of the digital age after security footage emerged, showing Lam's final known movements in a hotel elevator. Lam had been staying at the Cecil Hotel during a solo trip to California when guests began complaining about water pressure problems and discolored, foul-tasting water from the building's taps. Maintenance workers investigating the issues discovered Lam's body floating in one of 4 rooftop water tanks that supplied the hotel's water system. Tanks that were supposed to be secured and accessible only to authorized personnel. The circumstances of how Lam reached the tank defied logical explanation and raised disturbing questions about the final hours of her life. The rooftop water tanks were located on a restricted area requiring passage through locked doors, up a fire escape ladder, and across an open roof. Hotel security systems showed no record of anyone accessing these areas during the time frame when Lam disappeared. Most disturbing was security footage from the hotel elevator that captured Lam's behavior on the day she vanished. The video showed her entering an elevator alone, pressing multiple floor buttons, then engaging in increasingly erratic behavior that investigators found impossible to interpret. She appeared to hide in the corner of the elevator, peered cautiously around the doors, and gestured wildly at something outside the camera's range. The elevator footage revealed behavior that seemed to indicate Lam was interacting with someone or something not visible to the security camera. She appeared to be having a conversation, making hand gestures and responding to stimuli that couldn't be identified. Her body language suggested both fear and attempted communication with an unseen presence. Adding to the mystery was the elevator's malfunction during the incident. The doors remained open for several minutes while Lam stood outside in the hallway, despite the elevator's normal function requiring automatic closure. After Lam walked away, the elevator doors finally closed and the car began operating normally, visiting multiple floors in sequence as if following the button presses Lam had made earlier. The condition of Lam's body when discovered raised additional questions that investigators couldn't resolve. Her clothing was found floating separately in the water tank, but there was no evidence of struggle or trauma. Toxicology reports showed therapeutic levels of her prescribed psychiatric medications, contradicting theories that drug interactions had caused psychotic behavior. The water tank itself presented impossible circumstances for accidental death or suicide. The tank was approximately 8 feet high with a heavy lid that required significant strength to lift. Water level in the tank was sufficient that Lam would have been able to climb out if she had fallen in accidentally, yet her body was found floating face up as if she had drowned while unable to exit. Hotel staff reported that the roof access doors were locked and alarmed, with no indication of unauthorized entry during the time period when Lam disappeared. Security cameras monitoring roof areas showed no evidence of anyone accessing the water tank location. The fire escape ladder required climbing over security barriers that should have been visible to surveillance systems. Investigation revealed that the Cecil Hotel had a disturbing history of unexplained deaths and suicides dating back decades, with guests and staff reporting paranormal phenomena including voices, apparitions, and unexplained movements throughout the building. Some investigators suggested that Lam had encountered supernatural forces that contributed to her psychological state and ultimate death. The case was complicated by Lam's mental health history and medication regimen for bipolar disorder, leading to official conclusions of accidental drowning during a psychotic episode. However, this explanation failed to account for the physical impossibilities of reaching the water tank, the elevator malfunction, or the specific behaviors captured on security footage. Digital analysis of the elevator video revealed anomalies that enhanced the mystery rather than providing clarity. The timestamp showed unusual gaps and irregularities, suggesting either technical malfunction or deliberate editing. Some analysts identified distortions in the image quality during specific moments when Lamb's behavior was most erratic, raising questions about the footage's authenticity or completeness. The Elisa Lam case represents a modern paranormal mystery where extensive documentation and surveillance technology failed to provide rational explanation for impossible circumstances, leaving open questions about the role of mental illness, supernatural phenomena, and the limits of physical possibility in understanding unexplained death. These 5 cases demonstrate that even in our modern age of scientific advancement and investigative technology, some mysteries resist all attempts at rational explanation. Each involves documented physical evidence, multiple witness accounts, and extensive professional investigation, yet fundamental questions remain unanswered, decades or even centuries after the original events. Whether these mysteries represent gaps in current scientific understanding, evidence of supernatural phenomena, or simply the limits of human knowledge, they serve as reminders that reality may be far stranger and more complex than our conventional worldview allows. And perhaps most unsettling of all, they suggest that some questions may forever remain beyond our ability to answer. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this dark journey, hit the like button and subscribe. New horror documentaries every single night here on TrumbleDreams.